Short presentations today primarily. I want to go through a couple things before we start. Adam's going to be the first up on the agenda to remind us about the upcoming months and what we're going to be doing in committee, at least logistically. First, I want to say thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Dan, for agreeing to come in and give us an overview. My expectation after Dan is done, he's going to present, he thought 15, 20 minutes, something like that. Anybody on the committee that needs to ask questions, et cetera, please go ahead and do that. I do have some questions, but my guess is there'll be duplicates of other people sitting here. So I'll wait, and if I've got anything, I'll do that at the end, but expect me to ask you for your questions first. If you do need to stop Dan because it's so important at that point in time, you can do that, but otherwise maybe, I know everybody in here's memory is better than mine. I can't remember 15 minutes, but most of you can. So Adam, if you don't mind beginning and helping us through the logistics of what's going to go on the next few months.
Okay, good morning, Senators. Thank you, Senator Black. First off, just a reminder of staff. They're back here. Sarah does House Bill 789. If she could stand or wave, that's Sarah. Megan does House Bill 2 and 3. Taylor does 10, which is health and mental health. She's around the corner there. Cassidy does House Bill 11, social services. Dana is the assistant director. She does 5, 13, and all the CI stuff. I do 4, 6, and 12, so just from a staff perspective. And then Hillary is our assistant, and she's the one that sets up the books and keeps the hearing room set up for us. So as in the past, the hearing schedule is very, very similar. We will meet Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday mornings from 8 until or 8:15 until session starts on those days if need be. So that's the plan for that. We get the copy of the budget books from all the departments downstairs, and we'll put your name on it. We'll keep them down there. If you guys want the budget book, you can come and have them. Just keep in mind that we only get one copy for you, so if it's in your hands, it's in your possession. So we have limited extra copies. So other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward. Please, if you got any questions, please call. Come see us, whatever. Any questions?
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Like we're old professionals sitting, I shouldn't say old, professionals sitting up here.
This will be 20, not as many as Dan, but 22 sessions for me. So yes, we are just a little bit about the past. Dan and I have been through, and a couple other in the audience have been through times like you might hear is coming.
Dan, please.
For the record, Dan Hogg, State Budget Director, and as Adam said, yeah, unfortunately, I've been around a long time, 30 plus years. But I'm here. I'm going to give you a quick overview. I'm not going to go real deep into things. Obviously, all of our departments are going to come before you and get into the real depth of the budget. But just hit some high points, some priorities of the governor, some things like that, and then take any questions that you guys may have. I mean, I think that's probably the more important part of the hearing. So I will just get into it. So for our FY27 budget, total budget including CI is $54.5 billion. That's down slightly from $55 billion. For general revenue, overall, including capital expenditures, general revenue spending is actually up slightly, and I'll get into why that is in a second, even though we're talking about budget issues. And then so we'll just sort of get right into it. This budget cuts around $600 million of general revenue. So that is about a 4% cut to general revenue. Right now, we have around $16 billion of general revenue spending, including CI. And as the governor has talked about, this is going to be a challenging budget. Our ongoing revenues are less than our ongoing expenditures, which is the concern. We've had fund balances that we've used over the last several years to help us with this, but the governor is starting us on a path to get that in a sustainable fashion, get that where it needs to be. But this is going to be a multi-year project, that's going to take us a little while to get it. The good thing is, because of that fund balance, we can sort of take an orderly step down approach to getting the budget where it needs to be versus trying to fall off of a cliff. And so I think that's important. I think that's good. I think, we've seen a lot of growth in the budget over the last, 4 or 5 years. Since fiscal year 22, over 3,400 items have been added to the budget, and at a cost of nearly $13 billion general revenue. So that's a significant increase that we've seen in the budget over the last several years. But I know a lot of the talk here has been about the cuts, rightfully so, but I do want to make sure that people do understand that this budget does still provide $54 billion to fund services and programs for the citizens of Missouri. And it provides significant services for our most vulnerable. And so, again, while the cuts are difficult, these were difficult decisions, I also don't want us to forget that this budget still has significant funding in it for Missourians. Our current budget provides record funding for K through 12 education. It's the same as this past year for core funding. We did not cut the core of the formula. Last year, the formula received a $500 million increase, largest increase on record for this current formula. And so we are keeping funding stable for our K through 12 funding formula. We are not recommending funding the increase to that formula. We are also keeping the same higher education cores. We are not cutting the cores. I would say generally our cuts, and those are, I'll get to it, but those are, the handout here has them by department. On our website is our executive budget that goes into a little bit more detail. And then obviously, as you guys get the budget books, you'll see really deep into the weeds exactly what those cuts are. But the cuts that we've looked at this year, and like I said, this is the first step. I think we're going to have to be looking at reducing budgets for the next couple of years to get us back to fiscally sustainable budget. Is a lot of things that have been added to the budget over the last 4 or 5 years, those 3,400 items. A lot of those things are things that are good programs, but they're programs that when you don't have the money, you don't do it. Some things, they're nice to do when you have money, but when things get tight, you have to pull back and get back to more what the core role of government is for the state. And so that's what we're starting to do here. A lot of our cuts are, eliminating some of these new programs, cutting back some of these new programs. We've tried to find some efficiencies where we could around. We've cut laps, but there's, a pretty broad range of cuts. Most every sector of the budget that's funded by general revenue has taken some sort of cuts. We are not, so for pay plan for state employees, I know that's something that's very important. We are continuing the funding of the time of service pay plan that we put into effect this past year, or FY26, so that's the current year we're in. So that provides for state employees for every 2 years of service that they complete, they get a 1% increase. So up to 20 years, so could ultimately be a 10% increase. We think that's something that's been very popular and very effective with helping us with retention of our more experienced employees, which is something that's really important. Those experienced employees are the ones who really do the bulk of the work, and they're the ones who train up the new employees and help us make sure that we've got a quality workforce going forward. So we're very happy that we have that, but we did not, unfortunately, in this budget climate, we were not able to provide a general cost of living increase on top of that. But some state employees who meet those time of service milestones will get a 1% raise. If that's not, if you're sort of on that in-between year, you may not. And then if you're over 20 years, you got that last year, you won't get any more. But over the past 5 years, I think, since FY20, I guess, state employees have got over a 22% increase in pay, so I think we've done that. We've also, for state employees, several years ago, we increased the minimum salary that any state employee would be to at least $15 an hour, and with the pay increases we've gotten since then, I think that's up over $16 an hour for any full-time state employee. We've had targeted increases to some of the places where it's difficult for us to hire. In the past, we've done shift differentials for night work and things like that. We've done some things for, mostly in our 24/7 institutions. So while we don't have any across-the-board pay increases in this budget, there are, within the Department of Corrections, 2 differentials that we are putting into place because we are still having difficulty hiring corrections officers. So we put in a differential for corrections officers at maximum and medium security facilities to try to help with some of our hiring needs there. Yes, sir.
So then what are you doing? You know, I have 3 prisons in my district, so I was kind of interested in that, if I could stop you. So what are we doing for those in the medium and maximum security?
What's the dollar
Elite prisons.
So maximums, it's a $2.50 differential for working in a maximum security prison. And we're just and that's where the biggest issue is. And then for medium security, it's a 75-cent an hour differential. This was something that we've done smaller of these in the past, and they've been effective. So Director Foley came to us and asked, and he thinks that based on past history, these will be pretty effective in helping us recruit and retain corrections officers.
No, I'm really happy they're doing that because I've been there during COVID where they were having to move housing units because they didn't have people.
Then,
to
and the
guard
other
them.
thing, since we're talking about it, it's not a huge item, but since we're talking about it, we also are increasing the stipend for being on their CERT teams. Those are like the in-house SWAT teams. Those are the ones that do the searches and those kind of things. But a lot of times, a CERT team will do a search at a prison that's not their own. They try to take them to somewhere else because there's no issues there. They have a stipend now, but we're increasing that stipend by $100 a month to try to make sure that we have enough people on those teams. So that's the other thing we're doing in corrections. It's not a huge issue, but since you brought it up, I thought you'd be interested in that.
Dan, since you spent some time on the $15 minimum wage, are there any other departments that specifically, it's going to affect all state government, I understand that, but are there other departments that have raised greater concerns to you?
Like I said, what, 2 or 3 years ago, we moved every state salary up to $15 an hour. And since then, we've had, a 3% pay raise and then the 10-year pay, the time of service pay raise. So really, it should be pretty minor. Probably only our part-time positions would be affected because, like I said, with those, we started at 15 and then we've had pay increases since then. So last I saw, I think it was for last year. I haven't looked at the number for this year. I think that would have gotten up to like $16.20-ish or something like that. So I don't think it's going to be a significant financial issue for us. Like I said, we do have some part-time employees that might be around there, parks and some of those kind of people bring on summer employees and some of that. And I'm not sure all of those are above the $15 an hour, but we did not get any requests from departments for additional money to deal with that. So they think they can deal with it with their existing budgets. But again, for our full-time employees, almost all of them should be above that range right now.
Senator Silverman.
First of all, Drew dropped by yesterday in my office. He said he's going to send you over. Did you get that message so we can talk? That's okay. I mean, just if you would drop by my office.
I
today
will.
Today or Monday be fine.
I'm not going to throw anybody under the
Okay,
bus on the
understand.
microphone, but yes, I will make sure I'm coming by your office.
I'm sorry, today or Tuesday be fine.
I
My
can
second
come by
question
this afternoon.
Is, if I understood things right, last year the foundation formula had a pretty big increase based on the
Yeah.
school districts that determine the state adequacy target.
Yes, the the
Right.
performance districts.
And-
Yeah, it was around $500 million general
So
revenue,
what is
ongoing
causing the
money.
increase this year? Is just inflation?
The increase this year that they requested,
Uh-huh.
a big portion of that was based on virtual schools.
Okay,
But our budget is not recommending to fund that.
okay. But there's no foundational change that is driving the need for them to ask for more money,
I mean,
like last year had?
they have various categories that the formula is based into, and there's increases for each of those. I didn't bring that with you, but from their request, I can certainly get you that so you can see. But the vast majority of that, I think it was around $197 million increase, was for virtual schools.
Okay.
But I can give you a breakdown of
Okay,
what
we'll
the
talk
ask was.
about that. Okay,
But
thank you very much.
I'll try to come by your office either this afternoon if you're
Right.
around.
And I
or
want to
if-
talk about Dahab and
Okay.
disability stuff when you come, okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
Sure.
too. Since we're on the topic, I'm going to jump into that budget item there. So, Dan, you said most of it for the, I guess I'm going to call it the underfunding of the formula by 190 million. Okay, so I have it before me. It is, yeah, virtual was the 134. Okay.
Yeah, out of the 197. So
But
that's the
a couple of the
vast
bills that we just passed, like Senate Bill 68, there was that 169 calendar day incentive as well in there. And so that part of it was 33 million. We have, what else in here? We have the change in the formula from just the WADA to attendance as well, and that, or to enrollment, I'm sorry, and that was an important provision. So some of those factors in there, again, all things that we passed in state statute and now are not fully funding. So 190, help me out with the transportation categorical. There's an underfunding of that as well, correct?
So, as I said, we didn't cut any of the core funding. Last year, the increase to the transportation was put in as one-time money. So that has now been expended or is being expended this year. We did not put in an increase to replace that one-time money. The General Assembly passed it as one time, and so that was, the
But we're,
intent.
so for FY27, you all are recommending how much less than FY26 for transportation?
I think that was 15, I think that was, the one-time amount was $15 million, and we were not replacing that.
Okay, so, again, down 15 million for transportation. Okay. I'll save my other questions, I guess, for later, but I just wanted, while we were on education, wanted to talk
Sure.
about that. Thanks.
Like, happy to answer. Like I said, there was a $500 million increase last year. That was I think the biggest increase on this formula before that was about $120 million. And so that was a significant increase. The average increase is $50-60 million over the life of this formula. So $500 million increase was pretty substantial. So I think, obviously we've also are looking at a new formula and what that may look like coming in. So based on the overall budget picture, it was our decision not to fund those increases or replace that one time. I thought now I'd just hit a few of the items. So Hillary handed this out for me. Thank you, Hillary. And this has got legislative and budget stuff. I'm just going to hit the budget stuff since I'm the budget guy. So I try to stay in my lane here. But if you go through, on page 5 shows the core cuts by department. Again, The executive budget has a much more detailed listing of those core cuts. And then obviously, as I said, our departments will, in their budget books, have an even more detailed listing of all those, and are certainly willing and able to talk to you about all of those things. At the bottom of page 5, you see we also are announcing $286 million of expenditure restrictions for our FY '27. Most of that is just carrying over the expenditure restrictions from FY '26. There were a few new ones that we're starting here in January of 2026, projects that haven't started yet. The thing I will say about the restrictions is the way we look at that, we think those are projects that have merit. Those are projects that we'd like to see going forward. But unfortunately, in our current fiscal situation, we don't think this is the time to start them. But if, in FY '28 or beyond, or even in FY '27, if things dramatically increase, maybe we could release some of those and go. So we ultimately would like to see them completed, but we just don't think the time right now is to start them. But they're important enough to us that we didn't want to cut them out so they had to start over at the very beginning of the process and get in the budget and all of that. So that's sort of where we are on restrictions. Look, I try to be, pretty open with you guys. I don't expect any of those would be released during FY '27. I think it'll be FY '28 or beyond. So, I'm not trying to, I don't want to give people false hope. I don't want to be too much of Downer Dan, as Governor Parson liked to call me. But I do want to be truthful with people and try not to set expectations that aren't going to be met. So I don't want to give people false hope on that. But again, I think eventually those are things we'd like to see completed. Public safety, if you go to page 7, some of our priorities in the budget for public safety. Operation Relentless Pursuit, there's $1.25 million in the budget. This is just continued funding for the program to continue to try to apprehend felons. We have a continued funding of $2 million for Law Enforcement Academy scholarships. We have $7.7 million new money for investments in various equipment, forensic investigators, security operations throughout the DPS budget. We're continuing the $10 million for grants for the Blue Shield Communities Program. We are getting $14.7 million for technology to deal with unmanned aircraft. Specifically, this is going to be for the World Cup. We hopefully are getting the grant here soon. Since I'm mentioning this grant, and I've talked to the chairman about this, and I said it yesterday in the House, we are asking that the supplemental be passed by March 15th, because not just the drone money, but there is other money for the World Cup that we need to get out to them quickly. The federal government, there's $59 million that they have indicated to us that they will give to us on or around January 30th. We then have 45 days to transfer 100% of that money to the organizing committee of the host city. So in Kansas City, that is KC 2026. So we need to meet that deadline. Those are funds that are for security, other things. Some of that money will actually reimburse state services. KC 2026 is going to help us reimburse lodging for some of our troopers, and the SEMA DMAT team, which is the team that does sort of the emergency medical stuff. Also, we have the National Guard that'll be deployed there for security. So we are asking for a supplemental to move quickly. The House did the initial hearing on the supplemental yesterday. I presented that to them. I think I'm coming next week to present this to your committee, Mr. Chairman. And so we just ask for your help on this. There's a couple other time-sensitive issues there that I'll just hit real quick. In fact, the very last item here, the disaster response, the federal government has also indicated to us that there's $300 million of federal disaster money that is from COVID that will be coming to us. This is reimbursements to hospitals and other providers of expenses they had during COVID. It's a little ways after COVID, but they are finally getting around to that. But once they give us that money, we only have 30 days to get it to either the local governments or the private providers that actually incurred these expenses. And so we need appropriation authority to do that. So that's another reason we're asking for the supplemental to be moved quicker. And then the final reason, since I'm talking about it, is that, and I'll go into this more detail on the supplemental hearing, but with Department of Transportation, with MoDOT, last year there was a bill that was proposed to create the federal road fund. So in the appropriation process, we reduced some of the funding out of the state road fund was reduced and replaced with that federal road fund. The bill for the federal road fund did not pass, but we need to replace that funding back to the state road fund to get them. So it'll be the same amount of funding. We're just changing the funding source because that fund no longer exists. But they think that they'll run out of appropriation authority in the state road fund sometime in the spring. And so we want to make sure that we also get that to them so that they can keep paying all the bills on all the road projects we have going around on the state. So, also on the disaster response, included in that number is $186 million as response to the St. Louis tornado. So there's a supplemental for $86 million. We have $100 million from Senate Bill 1 from the special session, so that gives us $186 million total. We don't know exactly which fiscal year that's going to be spent in, so we're asking for a supplemental that gives us $186 million authority to spend this year. We're also asking for $186 million in authority to spend next year because we're just not sure how this is going to cash flow. Just real quick on that, that $186 million breaks down as FEMA has worked with us, and we have a project on demolition and debris removal, which is $156 million. We will get reimbursed 75% for that. FEMA has changed how they sort of operate disasters. Previously, the federal government paid up front, and then we sort of did our 25% share at the end. They are now saying that we pay up front, and then they reimburse us. They give us a little bit of some of the money up front, but then the rest of it comes. We've gotten, I think, $56 million right now from them, but the rest will be reimbursed afterwards. But we are now, we spend the money, they reimburse us. We are the ones that provide the procurement of the people who are going to do the debris removal and the demolition and all that. So it's a different way of doing it. It's the first time we've really had one, especially a big one in this way. So basically what is going to happen is we're going to pay $186 million, and then ultimately we will get reimbursed on the $156 million of that. We should get reimbursed 75% of that. So we have $156 million for debris, demolition and debris removal. There's $10 million that we spent out of Senate Bill 1 pretty quickly after the event to try to get things moving there. The city has asked us for $10 million to do some things that are outside the scope of what FEMA can do. And so we've agreed to that. We're working with them right now on a spend plan for that. When we get that, we're happy to share it with this committee. And then we also put in $10 million just as a contingency because we don't know what else is going to pop up. I will tell you that I do think we may have a governor's amendment on this because we are working with FEMA right now on a second project, which would be debris removal off of private properties that weren't eligible for the first $156 million. FEMA is working to get us an estimate of what that would cost and that kind of thing. So I do think there's a possibility we may have a governor's amendment for that. The good thing is, though, that would be a FEMA project, and we would ultimately get 75% reimbursed on that. So we will keep you up to date. This is obviously a situation that's sort of fluid, and working with FEMA, we're doing that. The way the process works is the city has hired a contractor to help contact the property owners in that area, because the one thing we do need that's been more difficult to get than I think we thought is we have to get permission for right of entry to go onto those people's property to demolish the structure or haul the debris away, and they have to sign documents and things like that. And the city is the one that's doing that, and once they get that done, they pass those applications to us. We do a quick review on them, and then we send them to FEMA. And so the city right now is working on that. The city's been a really good partner on this. They're doing really good work, but that's sort of the place we are. I mean, you just can't go on somebody's property and tear their structure down, even if it's in bad shape. So we've got to get that right of entry to legally be able to do that. FEMA won't give us any money, won't reimburse us unless we have those. So that's sort of where we're at right now. But we're trying to move as quickly as we can within the constraints of that kind of thing. So just a quick update on the disaster. I'm sure when SEMA comes before you, they can give you even more details on that. On page 9, you can see veterans is certainly a very high priority for Governor Kehoe. These are some of the things we're doing for our veterans' homes. We're doing a new electronic health records system. We've recommended increase in 40 staff for our veterans' homes to make sure that we're providing quality care for our veterans. We've given them just a $5.7 million increase in their budget for various expenses they have at the homes. We have $7.3 million to replace the nurse call systems to make sure that if our veterans need somebody, they can have a modern call system to get them in there. And then we also have $26.7 million for various maintenance and repairs on our veterans' homes around the state. If you go to page 13, this is some of the things we're doing in economic development. We're continuing to fund $400,000 for an apprenticeship program. This apprenticeship program is in the current year's budget, but the budget bill language limits it to St. Louis. The folks who run this program have asked us if we could change that language and make it statewide, so we are going to do that. We have $2.5 million for Missouri Technology Corporation. We have the TRICARE child care model, which is $2.5 million. That's been a model. We're continuing that funding at the current level, but that's a model that is new, but it looks like it has some promise. That is that the state pays part of it, the employer pays part of it, and then the participant pays part of it. And so there has been some success in that, being able to create some slots and things to help us with childcare. So it's something we want to see continue. It's, like I said, it's a new program. We want to get a little bit more proof of concept to see that it's working, but something that we think could possibly be a model for the future, possibly. The World Cup, $63.2 million. Almost all of that is federal money. That's the $59 million that we're going to have to pass through, and then a couple other little things there. Page 15 is agriculture. We have $800,000 in for Missouri FFA, as the governor talked about in his speech. We have $2 million for Missouri rice acquisition for a nonprofit to purchase Missouri-grown rice to help feed some of the homeless and hungry people in our state. We've got $2.9 million in for resilient food system. This is we're cooperating with USDA on this, and then we're reappropriating $34 million to continue to improve our low-volume roads. Education, we are continuing to fund $5 million for career and technical centers. We have tuition support for public safety personnel of $5.2 million. We have $7.5 million for an incentive for open enrollment, so a voluntary participation there. We have a total of $60 million for the empowerment scholarships. That's a $10 million increase. This budget has $343 million for child care for low-income families. That is the same amount as we have in the budget this current year, but because of federal funds that have been exhausted, we are going to have to put in $140 million of general revenue to just keep us at the same level that we're at currently. I will also say that I know there's been some talk about it lately, but the governor and we are still committed to this fiscal year paying at the first of the month and paying on enrollment. And so that is something that we still expect to happen this fiscal year. And then $4.6 billion is what we're spending on the foundation formula and transportation. Healthcare, we have $6.1 million increased funding for outpatient competency restoration services. We wanted people to be able to receive timely treatment so that we can get them so where they are competent to stay in trial. We have $8.3 million increase to substance use disorder treatment support, $62.1 million in Medicaid reform. This is a lot of the things that we're doing based on the federal H.R. 1 bill. These are things that we're doing to try to, we're having to spend some money on computer systems, other things within the department to try to make sure that our error rates get below the thresholds that the federal government has set so that we aren't having to put up a bigger, match on SNAP in the future. That's more of an FY28 issue than FY27, but obviously we need to get working on that right now to try to do that. There's also increase.
Is there a percentage, you have those memorized? I've been told in the last 45, 60 days how far apart we are.
On the error rate?
Yeah.
I can get that for you.
Yeah.
I don't have it off the top of my head.
It's
Senator.
been given to me.
But,
We just know I don't remember
this also
every number.
includes some system changes that we're going to need to do for the new work requirements that came down. It also includes some resources we're going to need because H.R. 1 changed the income verification from once every 12 months to once every 6 months. So obviously that's doubling the workload there. So these are increases that we are proposing here to try to help get started on that as soon as possible so we can get that done. And then rural health transformation, $216.3 million. We do have $100 million in the supplemental, sort of is depending on how quickly the federal guidance sort of gets to us. We want the opportunity possibly to spend some of this money in FY26, so we put a $100 million placeholder in, but we do have the full $216 million in FY27 to be able to start moving forward on that. I think that's probably all the things I wanted to hit in the budget. Happy to take any questions that you guys may have.
Yes, Senator.
Dan, I want to talk big picture. I know we have the revenue sheet before us.
Yes, ma'am.
So as we go through this, we look at FY25 with that imbalance of the 4.3, burn down $2 billion essentially to FY26. So you all are anticipating at the end of FY27, essentially the fund balance will be zero. By the time we start this process next year, we're carrying over essentially $0.
Yeah, based on the numbers we have here, yeah.
Okay. So this is, as we are all looking at this, I think the situation is more dire than anybody was anticipating even last year.
I think you start looking at the total resources available, especially the ongoing resources, and it's out of line with the expenditures. So if you look at the FY26 column there, you have collections of $15.2 billion, but then we have refunds of basically $2 billion. So net, that's $13 billion of collections that we have to spend. You go down to obligations, that top line operating approach, $15 billion. I mean, I think that's, in a nutshell, what's going on.
Okay. So
The other thing I will
essentially
say,
go on.
let me say one other thing, and I probably should have hit this in the overview. The other thing that's really been difficult for us this year, and hopefully this is the year we deal with it and then we move on, but there's probably close to $1 billion of federal funds that we have to pick up with GR in the FY27 budget. These numbers are not to the penny, but
Sure, but for the first time, we're using GR for the Medicaid.
So you've got $421 million that last year was switched from general revenue to a federal fund that we had a balance, but we knew wasn't going to get any more money. So we have to pick up $421 million in the managed care portion of Medicaid. The state share of the Medicaid expansion population, originally Governor Parson recommended that we do that state share with general revenue. Through the process, that was changed to a federal fund that we knew was going to run out of money in 4 or 5 years, and that's $360 million. And we're there at that point now. For FY27, we're going to have to do that. As I said earlier, and so there you're close to, $800 million right there. Then, as I said earlier in my overview, to stay at the same level we are with the child care subsidy program, we have to replace $140 million there. So you're over $900 million of federal funds that we have to replace with GR. And then there's some others in Medicaid, so it's close to $1 billion that general revenue is having to pick up that previously has been funded with federal funds. So that is also making this problem more difficult.
Okay, a lot to unpack there, and
Yes,
I'll save some
ma'am.
of those questions for the departments and how all of that is going to impact them. However, when we look at, I'm going back, let's go to FY26. You all are now withholding a little bit more than I think the governor originally said. I think it was a 211, and now you're to 231. You're anticipating for FY27 to withhold nearly $300 million from a budget we have yet to write.
Correct.
Okay, a budget we have yet to write, and you are telling
So
the
most-
departments already and releasing the list because it's out that we are not going
Yeah.
to, even if the General Assembly appropriates this money, for example, for going back pre-K funding, teacher career ladder, the baseline salary grant, you all will not receive that money.
Those are lapses. We didn't want to cut it, but those are money that's not being spent right now. Those are lapses in those.
But it could, again, if we appropriate the money, it could be spent.
But if we just cut it out of the budget, then there would be no chance. If we restrict it and there's a demand, depending on what the fiscal situation of the state looks like, we could take a look at that.
Okay, so let's go.
So, but, I think we're doing it now to try to be upfront and straightforward instead of doing it, passing a budget and then in July saying, okay, these are the things we're going to restrict. As I said earlier when I was talking about restrictions, the vast majority of these are capital projects. There's a few operating, but the vast majority of this is capital projects.
Fair.
And I think, as I said, these are projects that are in the core. They've been in the core. It's not, and we'd like to eventually see these projects completed. We think they are good projects. But with the current fiscal situation of the state, with our revenues being less than our expenditures, we don't feel like this is the time to start those projects. But we're telling everybody now so that people know what's happening. We're not building false hope, and we're trying to be upfront about this.
Okay. And I'm just going to say it like I see it, Dan. When I look at the numbers that you all are presenting us, you are showing us that these numbers that you all have presented will bankrupt the state by the end of this fiscal year,
By the end of FY26 or FY?
or by the end of FY27.
If there's not additional action taken in FY28, yes, the state would be in big trouble.
Okay.
This shows that at the end of FY27, we do have a small balance. But yes, the trend is not good. That's what we've said. That's what we said when we vetoed $300 million in July. We were trying to start the process then. So yeah, again, we're trying to be transparent. We want people to know what's going on so they can make informed decisions as this budget is going forward. And so, yeah, we've got, and the governor said in his speech, the FY27 budget is the start of this process. This is not the end of this process. There's going to be more difficult decisions in future budget years.
And at the same time, you were starting to talk a little bit about, for the first time, having to use GR where we haven't had to use GR before. And at the same time, we have less GR coming in terms of how much did the capital gains bill end up, how much less revenue we were anticipating that for FY '26 to be. I think the fiscal note was to the tune of like 100 and something million, and it ended up being what, closer to 400 or 500 million?
So the capital gains for what we did in the consensus revenue estimate, which is what these numbers here are based on, we, and we always sort of look at the most up-to-date numbers. We want to have the most accurate number possible for that. We think that's important. Obviously, forecasting is difficult anyway, but we try to use the most up-to-date data and get the best numbers we can. Our estimate for the capital gains in FY '26 is it will reduce revenues by about $510 million. Now, let me explain that really quickly, okay? The bill, that's basically a year and a half worth of reductions. We think the ongoing reduction will be more in the line of, I think, $360 million or thereabouts. But because the bill made
It was retroactive.
the change retroactive to January 1st, 2025, but didn't actually go into effect till August 28th, 2025, people didn't adjust their quarterly payments or that, because it was still a law up until August 28th, even though ultimately when the law changed, they could then pay less tax on those. But any capital gains, they realized they paid taxes there. So
But moving
what you're
forward, it's still
seeing-
going to be what was the number, 330?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
I know it's 300 and something.
Okay.
But anyway, so that's part of why we expect collections to sort of tail off towards the end of this year, because we think we'll see a lot of the capital gains impact on our revenues through refunds as people start filing their tax refunds, here in the next few months. But we do, so that's the number we have in there. I will say that, it's there certainly is a balance between how much revenue we collect, how much we take out of the pockets of our citizens, and how much we spend. And I think that's an appropriate discussion to have to what that balance is,
No, and I think that's fair, and
so
I'm
we
sure
think-
others have questions, and
Yeah.
so I'll wrap this up.
But
and-
I'll just say that our position is that we think we're on the side of leaving more money in the citizens' pockets and reducing some of the spending that we have. I mean, again, since FY '22, 3,400 items added to the budget, $13 billion of spending added to the budget. I think we need to pull back and get back to what our core services that government should provide for our citizens, for our most vulnerable citizens. And so that's our position. Obviously, I think we can have very respectful discussions on what that balance should be. Always happy to talk to you about that. And we always have very good, productive
No, absolutely,
discussions.
yes. And I think all of that is fair, and I know, members of this committee have expressed interest in going line by line for the budget. I don't think that's ever been more important than now as to what departments are asking at and to the why. However, here we started off our conversation today with the necessary pay increases for DOC, and absolutely, I want to make sure that those prisons are fully staffed. At the same time, you all are presenting a budget that shows cuts to programs that we know reduce recidivism and keep people out of jail so we don't have to end up spending more in the DOC budget, like the pretrial service program statewide to provide folks with wraparound services so they don't end up in jail long term, or, God forbid, treatment courts, which everybody I know on this committee has supported in the past, and there's cuts to those programs. Or again, talking about the competency restoration and what's happening right now with hundreds of Missourians languishing in jails and hospital beds, and yet there's not enough here in the budget to make any real strides to reduce those wait lists. So those are all things that I think we really need to discuss. But again, I think just big picture, I think these numbers are fairly staggering. And it's very unfortunate that we can see here in just a couple of years that the numbers presented by the governor show that essentially his plan is to bankrupt the state by the end of FY '27. And that's unfortunate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would not agree that we're going to bankrupt the state. Again, I think we have a plan. We said that this is the first year of that plan. We
We'll be-
acknowledge this. I think that we're being, very open and transparent on this. And
But again, just looking at the numbers, Dan, from FY '25, right, and what our imbalance was. We were talking about imbalance, and what was left in the coffers was $4 billion. Anticipated by the end of FY '27, again, essentially zero, $4 million. And again, and you all are anticipating that the budget or the departments aren't spending all their money. You all are anticipating that lapse. You're anticipating all of these things. And again, there's so much left to be seen. I've been one for a long time that said, yeah, we should have a rainy day fund and keep a little bit in there just in case something happens. God forbid our state is hit with another natural disaster. We want to be able to respond quickly because we know the feds certainly aren't.
Well, we do have a rainy day fund that is by constitution 7.5% of the previous year's general revenue collection. And
So
that
we
is
could-
fully, our budget has that fully funded. Again, I think, look, I appreciate your positions. I think, we're certainly always willing to talk to you about it. And obviously, the budget that we present is going to then be a give and take as it goes through the process. But I think fundamentally, we have to decide what that balance is between how much money you leave in our citizens' pockets and how much we spend. And, I think we just may disagree on that balance.
Okay.
I certainly respect your opinion on it, but that's where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Senator.
Hey, Dan.
Senator?
Hey, I'd like to get with you and further understand the dynamic between federal funding that we're not receiving in comparison to previous years, as
Okay.
well as the impact on federally qualified health centers.
Certainly, happy to do it. I can schedule something with your office and come talk to you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Dan, my questions have pretty well been answered. But I'm
Good,
going
I'm
to
glad I did it.
I am going to state this one, and you can respond answered if you want to at the end, because you have done this. Do the reductions that have been made in the budget get us to where we need to be in future years? You've stated that. Do you envision more cuts next year?
Yeah.
You've
I think-
stated that.
I think like I said, we're trying to be very open and transparent about this. Yes, the budget has gotten on an unsustainable path. The cuts we have made this year are the start of cuts. I think even in the speech, the governor said this was the start. And yes, we expect additional reductions in funding in future years to get us on a sustainable path.
Thank you. There's a few committees left, and Adams remind me to say this. Wednesday, correct? 8:15. Dan announced its supplemental budget. We'll be starting on that then.
So I didn't mean to steal your thunder, Mr. Chairman.
We know I don't get too excited about thunder. If I can show up someplace nobody knows who I am, I love it. Thank you. We're adjourned.
I'm getting it fixed. Like, come on. Thank you.